Dylan lowered the harmonica from his lips. He looked toward the front row. And in the silence that followed, he made a decision that had been waiting 50 years. The venue was small. Somewhere in New England. October 2019. One of those intimate theaters that held maybe 300 people if you packed them in tight. The kind of place Dylan preferred now, not the stadiums, not the festivals, just wood and curtains and people close enough to see his face. He'd been touring for 57 years straight. The never-ending tour, they called it. Jokes about how he'd die on stage one night, mid-song, and nobody would know the difference because he never explained himself anyway. Tonight was song number 7. Don't think twice, it's all right. One of the old ones. From 1963. Back when he was 22 and thought he understood everything. He'd sung the first verse the way he always did now. Older voice, rougher edges, the words worn down by decades of repetition until they meant something different than they had in 1963. The harmonica break was coming. He raised the instrument to his lips. And then he saw the man in the front row. Elderly. Maybe 80. Thin. Wearing a jacket too heavy for the season. Sitting perfectly still in seat C7, third from the aisle. His hands were folded in his lap. He wasn't taking pictures. Wasn't recording on his phone like everyone else. Just sitting. Watching. Waiting. Dylan's fingers found the harmonica holes automatically. Muscle memory from 6 decades of performance. But his eyes stayed on the man. And then the man did something nobody else in the theater did. He nodded. Not the excited nod of a fan. Not recognition. Something else. Something that looked like permission. Or maybe forgiveness. Or maybe just acknowledgement that they were both here, both still breathing, both carrying something heavy from a long time ago. Dylan lowered the harmonica. The band kept playing for half a bar, then stopped, confused. The audience shifted in their seats. This wasn't how the song went. Dylan stood in the silence. Looking at the man. Making a choice. Dylan didn't explain himself. He never did. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened in the winter of 1963. Bob Dylan wasn't Bob Dylan yet. He was still becoming. Still the kid from Minnesota who'd renamed himself and come to New York with a guitar and a head full of Woody Guthrie songs and the absolute certainty that he was going to matter. He was playing folk clubs in the village. The Gaslight. Girds. Places where you got paid in past hats and free beer and the chance to be heard by people who actually listened. He was good. Everyone said so. He had something. That indefinable thing that separates the ones who make it from the 1,000 others who don't. In December 1963, he met a man named Arthur Brennan. Arthur was a session guitarist. 42 years old. Played on other people's records. Made decent money. Had a family in Queens. He'd been doing it for 15 years, showing up at studios, playing what they told him to play, collecting his check, going home. They met at a recording session. Dylan was cutting his second album, needed some additional guitar work, and the producer had called Arthur. Just come in, play some backup, you'll be done in 2 hours. Arthur showed up. Dylan was sitting in the corner of the studio, smoking, looking irritated. He'd been fighting with the producer about arrangements, about how the songs should sound, about everything. You the guitar player? Dylan had asked. I'm a guitar player, Arthur corrected gently. There's about 10,000 of us in this city. Despite himself, Dylan smiled slightly. They worked for 6 hours instead of 2. Arthur played backup on 4 songs. Simple stuff, nothing flashy, just solid guitar work that filled the space Dylan's voice left open. At the end of the session, while the producer was in the booth mixing levels, Arthur packed up his guitar and paused. The songs are good, Arthur said quietly. Really good. You're going to do well. Dylan looked up. You think so? I know so. I've been doing this 15 years. I can tell the difference between someone with talent and someone with... Arthur struggled for the word. Necessity. You've got necessity. You're going to be important. Dylan didn't know what to say to that. He was 22. Everyone wanted to be important. But something about the way Arthur said it, not jealous, not bitter, just factual, made it feel real. What about you? Dylan asked. You want to be important? Arthur smiled, but it was sad around the edges. I wanted to. But I'm 42 and playing backup on other people's albums. That ship sailed. But that's okay. Somebody has to be in the room when the important people make their music. Dylan wanted to argue, but Arthur was already leaving, guitar case in hand, heading back to Queens and a family Dylan didn't know anything about. 3 months later, Dylan was on the cover of magazines. 6 months after that, he was playing Carnegie Hall. A year after that, he was being called the voice of a generation. He never saw Arthur Brennan again. But he thought about him. More than he wanted to admit. Especially in the years that followed. The fame, the expectations, the weight of being called important when all he'd wanted was to write songs. When people started treating him like a prophet instead of a person. When the success became its own kind of prison. He'd think about what Arthur said. Somebody has to be in the room when the important people make their music. And he'd wonder, what happened to Arthur? Did he keep playing session work? Did he get bitter? Did he regret not pushing harder, not demanding to be heard? Dylan never looked for him. Never tried to find him. That wasn't who Dylan was. He moved forward. Always forward. Never explained. Never apologized. Never looked back. Until tonight. October 2019. 56 years later. When he saw a man in the front row who nodded like he understood something nobody else in the theater could understand. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most important part of this story is still unfolding. The band had stopped completely now. 300 people sitting in confused silence. Dylan's guitarist looked at him questioningly. Dylan ignored him. I need to do something different, Dylan said into the microphone. His voice was rough, quiet, almost conversational. You paid to hear the songs. I'll get back to them. But first. He stopped. Started again. 56 years ago, I was in a studio recording my second album. Nobody knew who I was yet. I was just a kid with a guitar. And there was a session player there. Guy named Arthur Brennan. Played backup on 4 songs. He told me I was going to be important. I didn't believe him, but he said it like he knew. Like he could see something I couldn't see yet. The audience was completely still. This wasn't part of the show. Dylan never talked this much between songs. Never shared stories. Never explained. I've been thinking about Arthur for 56 years, Dylan continued. Wondering what happened to him. Whether he kept playing. Whether he hated me for becoming what he wanted to be. Whether he was okay. Dylan looked directly at the man in the front row. Is your name Arthur Brennan? The man didn't move for a long moment. Then slowly, carefully he nodded. A ripple went through the audience. Someone gasped. Others leaned forward, trying to see. Dylan put the harmonica down on the microphone stand. He stepped off the stage, something he almost never did, and walked down the 3 stairs to the audience floor. The crowd parted automatically. He walked to row C, stopped in front of seat 7. Arthur Brennan looked up at him. 80 years old now. Thin. Gray. Wearing a jacket that had seen better decades. His hands were shaking slightly in his lap. Did you keep playing? Dylan asked quietly. Arthur's voice was barely audible. For a while. Then I taught. Guitar lessons. Kids mostly. I retired 10 years ago. Did you hate me? Arthur smiled, that same sad smile from 1963, just older now, more worn. No. I never hated you. I watched you become everything I said you'd become. I was proud. Why didn't you ever reach out? What would I have said? Hey, remember me, the session guy from 56 years ago? You had a life. You had work to do. I understood. Dylan was quiet for a moment. The theater was so silent you could hear breathing. "I owe you something," Dylan said. Arthur shook his head. "You don't owe me anything." "I do. You were right. I became important. But you were also right about something else. Somebody has to be in the room when the important people make their music. You were in the room. You played backup. But without people like you, people like me don't happen." Away from the spotlight, Dylan made a choice no one expected. Dylan turned to his band. "Bring up a chair. Center stage." The stagehands scrambled. Within 30 seconds there was a simple wooden chair positioned in the spotlight, right beside Dylan's microphone. Dylan looked at Arthur. "Come up." Arthur's eyes widened. "What?" "Come up on stage." "I can't. I haven't played in 10 years. My hands don't work like they used to." "I don't need you to play. I need you to sit. I need people to see you." The man who was in the room. Arthur started to cry. Not loud. Just quiet tears running down his weathered face. Dylan reached out his hand. Arthur took it. Together, slowly, they walked to the stage. The audience erupted. Not polite applause. Standing ovation. 300 people who'd come to see Bob Dylan instead watching him help an 80-year-old man climb 3 stairs onto a stage. Arthur sat in the chair. Dylan returned to his microphone. He picked up his harmonica. "This is Arthur Brennan," Dylan said into the microphone. "He played guitar on my second album in 1963. He told me I was going to be important when nobody else believed it. He spent his life playing on other people's records and teaching kids to play guitar. Without people like Arthur, there is no me. There is no music. There's just..." He paused. "There's just empty rooms." Dylan raised the harmonica to his lips. He played the break from "Don't Think Twice." But this time it sounded different. Slower. Heavier. Like he was playing it for Arthur. Like he was finally paying back something he'd carried for 56 years. When he finished, he looked at Arthur sitting in the wooden chair under the spotlight. "Thank you for being in the room," Dylan said quietly. Arthur nodded. That same nod from earlier. Permission. Forgiveness. Acknowledgement. What followed stayed with everyone who witnessed it, long after the sound faded. The concert continued. Arthur stayed on stage in the wooden chair for the rest of the show. 9 more songs. Sometimes Dylan would glance over at him. Sometimes Arthur would close his eyes and just listen. Sometimes they'd make eye contact, and something would pass between them that nobody else could name. After the show, backstage, Dylan gave Arthur something. A check. A large one. "For the session work," Dylan said. "With 56 years of interest." Arthur tried to refuse. Dylan wouldn't let him. "And one more thing," Dylan said. He pulled out a permanent marker and signed the wooden chair Arthur had sat in. Bob Dylan and Arthur Brennan. October 2019. Both here. The chair went home with Arthur that night. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. Arthur Brennan died 8 months later. Peaceful. At home. The chair was beside his bed. In his will, he left it to a music school in Queens with instructions. "Let the kids who'll never be famous sit in it." Dylan never spoke about that night publicly. Never explained. But for the rest of the never-ending tour, there was always an empty chair on stage. Sometimes in shadow. Sometimes in light. Nobody asked why. Those who were in the theater that night in October 2019 still talk about it. Not as fans. As witnesses. To the moment when Bob Dylan, who never explained, who never looked back, who carried the weight of being important for 6 decades, stopped everything to honor the man who'd been in the room. The man who played backup. The man who taught kids. The man who mattered. The harmonica break-in, "Don't Think Twice," sounded different after that night. Anyone who knew why. Some debts take 56 years to pay. Some rooms never empty. And sometimes, The most important thing you can do is stop the music long enough to say, "I see you. I remember. You were there." Arthur Brennan was there.